You're listening to the 26th episode of one of the fastest growing podcasts on the internet, Unscripted Company, hosted by yours truly, JK, and my lovely co-host, Riley. Riley, it's been a crazy week. I know we were just looking at the show notes. There are a lot of topics to cover this week. We have everything from the Paris Olympics kicking off. I know the opening ceremonies were a little controversial, to say the least. We have some more news with current Vice President Kamala Harris, theoretically soon to be potentially maybe the Democratic nominee for President of the United States, Kamala Harris. So we'll dive into a little bit of that. There's also just some wild news out there. Some Mexican cartel shenanigans, some poisonous killer worms that can duplicate themselves that are hitting Texas. But with Unscripted Company, we have no idea what we're actually going to end up talking about. So half those topics, we may never get to it. Who knows? But let me ask you something first, Riley. How's your week been? Anything crazy? Anything new? How's life up in the DFW?
So you ever have those weeks where it just feels like everything was just kind of a blur and everything just kind of blends in together and you just kind of don't remember anything about your week?
Never. My weeks are always very well organized. I remember every aspect of them down to the second, and I journal everything immediately after.
Okay, cool. So you're 1%. Got it. Okay.
Just kidding. Yeah.
No, it was good. It's just like, so we've been, obviously, all the NAR settlement stuff. So we've been going over all the new forms and updated forms and everything. I'm going to have a soon-to-be listing going live, hopefully at the beginning of September. And then got a couple prospective buyers. Hopefully going to be getting them under contract very soon to hopefully have a couple closings in August. That would be ideal. But I mean, it was a good week. Topped it all off. Went to go see Deadpool and Wolverine on Friday, which was not going to go into any spoilers, but the opening scene was probably one of the best opening scenes like I've seen in a Marvel movie in a very, very long time. Like, since going back to phase 1, like all the way up to like Infinity War and Endgame. Like, this is probably the best opening scene I've seen in a minute.
Okay. I did see, I think I might have put it in the show notes. Maybe I didn't, but I saw that Deadpool and Wolverine broke some box office records for this year, at least. Like, currently it has, I think, the largest opening
96
weekend.
million.
Yeah. But then also kind of tied into that, did you see the big news with Robert Downey Jr. that dropped last night?
So at first, as a Marvel fan, like when I see, and I understand you can have characters play multiple roles. I get that. But when you have certain characters that have played certain roles in Marvel and then they all of a sudden come back around and they're playing a completely different role in a different, now granted the multiverse does exist. But when I saw that it was him, I thought people were trolling. Like, I thought this was like a troll. Although there's no way, because he doesn't look like the one that would play Doctor Doom. Everyone thought it was going to be Jared Leto, who they thought was going to be playing.
Interesting.
Doctor Doom. But when they showed him, I was like, okay, like, let me think this through. Like, at first I didn't like it because also, too, I thought it was Marvel's and Disney's way of like, okay, we're like really stuck where we're at right now. We have nowhere to go. What can we do? So think about how much money they probably had to offer this man just to come back and play Doctor Doom of all characters, which also begs the question about how they're going to continue the multiverse. Like, how they're going to, like, I've got my questions about it ever since Deadpool and Wolverine. But I'm kind of excited to see where it goes. Like, it's hard for me to picture him playing, but we'll see,
Yeah, there was, I'm going to share it real quick on my screen, a tweet, or I guess post from Trong Fan. Good Twitter follow, or X follow if you ever get bored, but saying how Robert Downey Jr. did Tropic Thunder in the first Iron Man in 2008, then made $450 million playing Tony Stark and Iron Man in 8 other MCU films, then won an Oscar for Oppenheimer, and will now collect another fat Marvel bag to play Doctor Doom. Incredible run. Because I don't know if you remember, I think a lot of people maybe in our generation forget, he almost never made it in Hollywood because he went through the whole drug situation.
Yep.
I forget the details of it, but he went to rehab, cleaned himself up, but heck of a comeback story, to say the least. I feel as if someday someone's going to play or have a movie made about Robert Downey Jr.'s life? Because I feel like that's an incredible run.
Well, it was I know, so I know a little bit about the details of what happened. Um and I can't remember the director's name that directed the Iron Man movies. But none of them wanted Robert Downey Jr. Like nobody wanted him, and he took a chance on him. He was like, I want you for this role," and they thought it was just gonna be a one and done. Like they didn't think it was gonna do what it did. And next thing you know, you have 10 years of him as Iron Man, which I think is the hardest part for me as a Marvel fan. Like I know a lot of other people are like, "Oh my god, this is so awesome," but like I when I see Marvel characters, like when I see actors portraying Marvel characters, I'm like, they can never be another Marvel character. Like even with the multiverse, like it's hard to depict that. And so I don't know. That's just me, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, with the first movie, I mean, it won't be till 2026. So
Yeah, it showed. I guess he's going to be in 2 of the future Avengers movies. But I agree with you. I think first of all, he'll be great for the role. But going back to what you said, it is weird that that human has played another very major character in the Marvel universe already. I'm not even that big of a aficionado when it comes to like the Disney Marvel universe like franchise. I'm aware of the storylines and whatnot, but even as a person on the outside looking in, I'm like, okay, that's a little weird to have someone who's already been in a major role recasted for another, probably I would assume a pivotal villain. Because if I know anything about Marvel and Doctor Doom, like Doctor Doom is pretty dope. Like he's like an international like politician, super villain, super genius, super deadly. I mean,
he's actually one of
Doctor
the top
Doom.
strongest enemies in the Marvel universe, which is so hard to believe in certain cases because not to get all nerdy, but obviously you have Thanos, you have Galactus, you have Ego, which is
And
a
Thanos
planet.
needed a whole glove to even do anything. Let's be honest here.
Facts. And so like you have multiple ones, but he's actually one of the deadliest, like just as far as like what he's capable of doing. Um, and so I mean, like I said, I'm excited to see this iteration of Doctor Doom because obviously, if anyone out there has watched the original Fantastic Four movies, well, Doctor Doom was the villain in both movies. Um, it was good, but I mean, it's not Marvel now, and so I'm hoping that this isn't like again. I feel like this is just Marvel's way of like we got to figure something out. Like we're drowning here right now because nobody likes our movies. But prior to this announcement, though, Marvel did come out and say that they're cutting back on the amount of movies that they're making every year, and that they're also cutting back on the amount of TV shows that they're putting out every year because they want to focus on quality over quantity again. And I'm like, thank you, because that's exactly what you did in phase 1, 2, and 3. And what changed? Why? so, I'm excited for that.
I think the money changed. I think that's what it was. They saw the checks that were coming in from the box office and just, everything that sells around that as well. And they were like, we got to do more of this. They were like, okay, if one movie gives us X amount of dollars, let's multiply that by 20. And just like, they thought it was going to be a money printer. And I think it was initially, but once, I know there's a term for it, was like generation 1 or generation 2 of the Marvel franchise. Like once that came to a conclusion, I think it kind of hit a gray area of you were introducing characters at speed that no one, I'm not going to say they didn't care about them, but they didn't have that, 2-decade buildup the same way that like Iron Man 1 came out in 2008, right?
Yeah.
And so when did that final Avengers movie come out? That was like what,
2021? No, 2020. Yeah. 2020.
That's what I'm saying. Like we're thinking in decades here in the sense of from start to finish, almost 2 decades,
I think it was 2020. Right? No, it was 2019 actually. So it's 2018, 2019. But and that's one of the things, and we won't stay on this topic too long. But as far as like Marvel movies, you're not wrong on that. It's like they have introduced characters that over time you don't know anything about. Like again, not to talk about the Eternals, but I thought that the Eternals was actually a decent movie. It was a good movie, but you introduced characters that nobody knew, and now like we haven't even had the second movie yet. Like no one really understands who the celestial beings are. No one understands anything like that. And so it's kind of hard. So it's like, I think Marvel just needs to find that spark again, because after you finished the Avengers movies and you were done with like the end game and Infinity War, they should have kind of got back to those roots of like, okay, now we're done with this. Let's kind of how they started off, focus on the aftermath and the after effects, and then go from there and be like, okay, this is kind of where it's going now. This is where like, and it kind of hit it off on Spider-Man No Way Home with the multiverse, like him making the decisions that he made brought other villains and the other two Spider-Man, from those other two universes to his. So you kind of already hit that on the nose, and it's just they wanted to focus on that quantity over quality, and they just kept pushing movies out, even if half of them didn't even have anything to do with what was going on. So,
Yeah. Long story short, for those of you out there listening and watching, let us know down in the comments section. Fun fact for those of you on Spotify, Spotify now formally has a comments section. So that's a little fun nugget there. They had like a feedback section before, but now it's a legit. They're trying to mimic other social platforms with a comment section. So let us know, do you think Robert Downey Jr. is the right fit? Or are you a little upset that he is double dipping in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and not even being able to use the multiverse as an excuse as to why this is happening? I think it would be dope if they used the multiverse to say like, hey, stuff happens, but they're not even going that route with it.
well, in the comic books, though, funny enough, that actually is the case. Like I think he actually is Victor Von Doom in another like multiverse in the comics, if I'm not mistaken. I remember reading something about that like today or yesterday or something like that.
Interesting.
So it's definitely going to be interesting. I think they are still going to play on the multiverse, but it's just now instead of it being Kang the Conqueror, it's now, Victor Von Doom that's going to be the main baddie in this phase 5, 6 or whatever. So we'll see.
Well, interesting. So one thing that we talked about, I forget if it was on the live stream. I think it might have been the episode before that, episode 24, but we introduced a new segment of the show that I didn't think we'd ever have again, but I wanted to bring it back for the sake of it. It is the Cybersecurity Technology Super Information Corner, pending a name change on this, but want to keep people up to speed on some information. So Riley, were you aware of this CrowdStrike situation that happened this past week?
I was. It didn't affect us at all. Like I was still able to do all my work. I was still able to do all my stuff. I had no issues. I know a lot of tech companies and people that had to rely on office-based, servers and stuff like that had some issues for a little bit of the day, but
it was crazy. So for those of you who don't know, CrowdStrike, basically, let me give you a breakdown of what happened. So on this past Friday, CrowdStrike, which is like a cybersecurity software company, they released a faulty update that rendered around 8.5 million Windows devices unusable. And this was according to Microsoft directly. The update that they had on their system for CrowdStrike caused the affected computers to be stuck at the infamous blue screen of death, which is like a bright blue error screen with the message that is shown when Windows typically crashes. If you've ever used a Windows computer prior to today, you've probably experienced the blue screen of death at some point. What was crazy about this outage is, yes, 8.5 million Windows devices impacted, but it was that since CrowdStrike is the cybersecurity software, all these Fortune 500 companies have CrowdStrike loaded on their PCs. So everyone from public utility companies to airline companies to TV stations, so like literally anyone you can think of that uses a Windows PC for commercial application probably had CrowdStrike downloaded on it. And so it just knocked all their computers offline. So think about an airport. All those computers that rely on Windows, they were all bricked. None of them could be used. So like all these international airlines were shut down. Flights had to be delayed, diverted. It was crazy. The funny thing that came out of this, and the headline of this kind of gave it away if you were paying attention to the screen. How does CrowdStrike remedy this? They offered a $10 apology gift card to say sorry for the outage. So CrowdStrike, of course, after crashing millions of computers across the world, offered its people $10 worth of Uber Eats gift cards as an apology. So for context here as well, the people that they're giving these $10 gift cards to, the issue that caused the outage on these computers was CrowdStrike had pushed an update, a software update that caused the blue screen of death because there was like an error message. I'm not a computer programmer. I can't get into the specifics of it. You can Google it, figure it out, your smart cookies. But the nature of the outage caused people to have to physically come back into work over the weekend or early Monday morning to remedy this, because it wasn't something that CrowdStrike could just push out and fix it. You had to physically be there to like basically roll back the software. And so basically the big whoopsies, the, hey, we owe you one, is a $10 Uber Eats gift card. And so I'm just kind of curious, like all these IT professionals at these huge multi-billion-dollar corporations, like what are they getting for lunch with $10?
They're getting their delivery fee paid. that's that's it, man. Uber Eats is so. I did Uber Eats one time. Okay, one time, and I ordered Chick-fil-A. I was like, and this was like back in my like, obviously still Applebee's days, but like I got up, I played video games all day on my days off. Like I didn't do anything else, had no goals. I was like, all right, I'm gonna order some Chick-fil-A, and so I ordered Chick-fil-A. Keep in mind, Razor Ranch was still growing, but they had a Chick-fil-A 5 minutes down the road. Okay. I ordered a chicken sandwich, some fries. I think I had the mac and cheese and a drink. And it cost, after taxes and the delivery fee and a tip, because I still tipped them, it was like $35. I was like, no, never doing that again. And so I refuse to order DoorDash, Uber Eats, or anything like that. Like I will cook, I will make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I will go buy some 50-cent ramen noodles and eat those again before I order Uber Eats, because I'm just not. It's just not. I don't understand how people. Well, actually, I do understand how people can just keep ordering it because it is convenient. But it's like, if you ever wonder why you can't buy a house, because you're spending all your money on Uber Eats and delivery fees. Just saying.
Yeah, no, you're totally correct. It's kind of a racket with Uber Eats, the amount of charges that get topped on top. Like the tip makes sense. The delivery charge I've always thought was some BS. I understand they have to make money as a company. The one, I guess, like the biggest hack I found with Uber Eats, and I'm sure other delivery services do this too, but Uber has what they call Uber One. It's basically like their version of like, YouTube Premium, Amazon Plus, whatever you want to call it. It's a subscription service for all the Uber products. So even the ride share. But the cool thing is you can get a 3-month trial. And I found a hack, which was, I had the 3-month trial, which gives you, it knocks the delivery fee off. It basically removes the taxes, and it can take like 15-20% off the overall order. So yeah, it's still a little bit more of an upcharge than like physically going to the place, but it makes it super affordable in comparison to other delivery options. So you get 3 months of that. Then what you do is you accidentally throw your cell phone down a flight of stairs, cracking the screen, breaking the phone. And so you have to go buy another phone. So once you get the new phone, Uber Eats forgets that you already had the 3-month membership that you just canceled for free, and they offer you another one. So now you have 6 months worth of Uber One for free, basically.
Okay, sweet. So yeah, if anyone's listening, and you just don't like cooking food, there's your options. Like that's your only option. So do with that information what you will.
Yeah. To circle back on the CrowdStrike thing, are you aware, there was a kind of a viral story that came out of this. Are you aware of the one company, maybe the biggest company, that was not impacted by CrowdStrike, but had CrowdStrike on their computers?
Why do I feel like it was like Tesla or something like that?
It was a transportation company. It was Southwest Airlines, and you'll never guess the reason why. So I have an article up here from Tech Radar. Headline says, Southwest Airlines avoided CrowdStrike Microsoft outage because it's still running Windows 3.1. So basically the fourth largest US airline remained free of the blue screen of death errors because its operating system hasn't been updated in decades. Now, Riley, before I scroll down, do you want to guess which year Windows 3.1 released in?
Windows 3.1.
And for those of you listening or watching, don't Google this. Put down in the comments what year you think it was. Then I'll tell you. Then we'll figure out if you're right or wrong. But I want the shock factor here.
So I want to say, I think it was like 2002, 2003, because they had Windows 2000, which obviously came out in 2000. But I want to say it had to come out in like 2000, anywhere from 2003 to 2004.
1992.
Okay, way off.
Yeah. So the I don't even know if it's technically irony, but the funny part of the story is Southwest had CrowdStrike, but because their version of Windows was so far outdated, the error did not impact their systems at all because they were running Windows 3, was it 3.1?
Yeah. How do you operate an airline or an like how?
That's a great question because I don't know if you remember, was about like a year, maybe 2 years ago, Southwest was in a lot of heat because their systems went offline. I think it was due to like a technical glitch or a bug unrelated to CrowdStrike. So they had to ground a bunch of their
I could
planes.
see why. I could see why.
But on the flip side, because CrowdStrike, is assuming that everyone's running Windows 10, Windows 11, heck, even Windows XP, which it's crazy to think that they're not even running XP. They were safe while Delta, American Airlines, United, like everyone else went offline and had to reschedule flights for like a day plus. The other wild stat that came out of this, Microsoft doesn't even support this version of Windows anymore. They ended support December 31st, 2001. So Windows itself has not even formally supported this version. Or I guess Microsoft hasn't supported it since 2001.
So what do they do if it just goes out?
That's a great question.
That's a fantastic question.
My assumption is, while yes, there's still technical bugs and things to be concerned with, I think it's probably a pretty stable system. Because I imagine if you're an airline, how many new softwares are you really installing on your systems? Like it's you probably have your set number of softwares. And like, yes, with CrowdStrike, they're going to push updates for that software, but you're not really looking for new softwares to install. But what do I know? Like I have no idea how to run an airline, nor have I ever cared to look into that.
It's called Unscripted Company Airlines.
Unscripted Airlines.
Unscripted Airlines, right?
Yeah. I think we have some. So in the comment section down below, leave your credit card numbers and we'll make sure that we get you set up with early access tickets for Unscripted Airlines. We're all flying to Hawaii, but in order to register, you have to drop your credit card information in the comment section down below.
Yeah, no, that's just insane to me though. Like, and what blows my mind though is just the fact that they're like, we're gonna only give you this $10 gift card. That's all we're gonna give you.
Yeah,
and it's like awesome.
We definitely want to get into the meat and potatoes of what happened this week. There was more information that dropped as of yesterday, basically, that still is in relation to this all-important cybersecurity, whatever name I called this segment. I had some obscene name. For those of you that use TikTok and are curious about where your data is headed in TikTok, I'll give you a headline from PBS News. The Department of Justice, which is the United States government, accuses TikTok of collecting U.S. user views on issues like abortion and gun control and sharing it with the Beijing-based parent company, ByteDance. So I really have nothing else to say other than just know that your data is being bought and sold. And no matter how safe a service says it is, foreign governments are going to get their hands on your data. So, for those of you who like to swipe on TikTok endlessly at night, I'm just as guilty as you are about that. But just know that people and governments around the world are watching.
I am not one of those guilty people that scrolls on TikTok. I am a normal person and I scroll on Facebook Reels and YouTube Shorts, and that's what I do.
I feel like a grandpa sometimes because Abby, my wife, she'll look at Reels on Facebook, and I know they exist on Instagram. She'll look at Instagram, but there's times where I'm like, are you watching videos like swiping on Facebook? And it throws me off because first of all, up until maybe a couple months ago, I didn't even know that Facebook had Reels built into it. And then I asked the question, okay, Meta, which is the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, WhatsApp, etc., like why do they have Reels on both platforms? Now I understand they both have different user bases. One is aging millennials and the other one is the parents that ran their kids off the platform to begin with. But I'm like, it's weird that the same company basically has Reels separately on both platforms.
Yeah, to my knowledge, like it is the same thing, but they're actually different. I can't explain how, but I learned it actually in a social media class that I took, kind of just teaching more about like, what is going to get people to notice you on social media, things like that, like how you're going to get your numbers up for what I do for work. and they're actually two different algorithms. And it's funny to say that because they're the same thing, they're the same company, but it's actually two different things. As far as TikTok goes, the only time I ever watch videos on TikTok is if Dana, my wife, sends me videos and she's like, "Did you watch that?" when she gets home from work. And I'm like, "No, I was driving all around DFW today. Didn't have time to." She was like, "Well, I'm sorry. My feelings are hurt." And I'm like, "Well, I'm sorry. I didn't have time." Anyways, not that big of a deal, but I have an account. People follow me, like people that I know. I don't follow them back. It's not to be rude or mean. I don't like using it for those purposes because I know what it does. I just have it because she sends me cat videos or whatever other videos she sends me, and that's it. So, if you have TikTok, be careful because yes, your information is being bought and sold. But to be fair, your information is pretty much being bought and sold almost anywhere you go. Like they say, protect all your information. There's only so much you can do to protect your information. If it's going to get out there, it's going to get out there, and someone's going to get their hands on it one way or another. So just try to mitigate it everywhere you can. Don't use the same passwords, like your birth date, your anniversary date, your pets' names, things like that. Don't use that stuff. Like mix it up a bit, people. Come on.
Definitely. So into the meat and potatoes of the week. Riley, I'm going to let you dictate where we head on this. Do you want to dive into a conversation about a conspiracy between the Obamas and Kamala Harris's, nomination potentially as president for the Democratic Party? Do you want to dive into some shenanigans with the Mexican cartel getting arrested through what appears to be a trick per se? Or do you want to dive into Yellowstone waking up, potentially preparing to destroy us all?
So I've actually, let's go ahead and dive into the Kamala stuff because I have some opinions about this, and not like strong hateful opinions, but more so like actual knowledgeable opinions about why people should not be happy about why this is happening right now. So kick it off. Let's get
Good
it.
deal. No, yeah, I'm gonna throw up on my screen an article here. So over the weekend, Seymour Hersh, who's an investigative journalist, posted a posting on Substack, which for those of you who don't know what Substack is, first of all, wake up, go read some good literature online, but it's an email newsletter service. Fun fact, Unscripted Company also has an email newsletter. You can go to unscriptedcompany.com, find the link, take a look, subscribe. But I digress. They had an article come out over the weekend, and so I'm going to basically run down the summary of that. So the headline is Obama instigated anti-Biden coup with 25th Amendment threat, according to Seymour Hersh, who's an investigative journalist. So Seymour Hersh says President Obama was, quote unquote, deeply involved with the alleged coup and called Joe Biden after his incident in Las Vegas, which from all outward appearances looks like a major slip and fall with a significant hit to the head. So for those of you who weren't aware, prior to recording this, Biden kind of went into hiding a little bit because he had a couple of showings out in Las Vegas about a week plus ago, had a little bit of an incident. There's a lot of stories going around as to like what happened, but it was health related. A lot of it seemed to be very time sensitive and urgent. Makes sense. He's an older gentleman. So they basically flew him back to Delaware, which is his home state. And he kind of hid, for lack of a better term, for a little bit, healed up, apparently had COVID as well within that time frame. And then out of nowhere, basically said, hey, I am dropping out of the race for re-election. And then basically anointed Kamala Harris out of the blue to say, hey, this is like our pick. So that caught a lot of people off guard. And it was like, hey, you said you were running, now you're not running. So Seymour Hersh has some sources here that are kind of giving me some interesting insight as to what potentially went down with that. So Seymour Hersh, in his article on Substack, quoted, I went over reports this week with a senior official in Washington who helped me fashion an account of a White House in a complete disarray. Going on to say, Obama called Biden after breakfast on July 20th and said, quote, here's the deal. We have Kamala's approval to invoke the 25th Amendment, according to a senior Washington official who told Hersh. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Hakeem Jeffries were reportedly directly involved with this situation. Now, he goes on to say Obama's plan was to not immediately endorse Kamala, but it was clear that she would, quote unquote, get the nod. Obama had an agenda and he wanted to seek it through to the end. And he wanted to have control over who would be elected. So not only does this outline track with every data point known about events leading up to the Biden announcement, it also aligns with the entire background of the Obama team operating inside the Biden administration. Team Obama has always been in control. Heck, the Obamas never even left Washington, D.C. after their term in office. The bigger understanding is in the final quote in Hirsch's article here, saying, quote, Team Obama had an agenda and he wanted to seek it through to the end, and he wanted to have control over who would be elected, end quote. This is the part where people forget the risk to Team Obama that has never gone away. So the Obama fundamental change was as a construct of malicious intent, much of it fraught with unlawful activity, only possible by weaponizing the various agencies and bureaus of the U.S. government, going all the way back to 2007 through 2017. That decade is filled with unlawful action by Barack Obama and the people behind him. This is the core of their ongoing need to control, likely for a generation or more. And this article goes on to list all the kind of sketchy things that went on through that. I'm also realizing I think I misread the top of it here, because let me share something else that was a screenshot from that article that was basically talking about how the Obamas were going to invoke the 25th Amendment. So this right here is a screenshot from that same article saying, at the point, according to Emily Gooden, who's a reporter from the Daily Mail, who was in the traveling press pool, the president was deathly pale, quote unquote. And Air Force One flew at maximum speed to Delaware. This is coming back from Nevada, where the president has a weekend retreat at Rehoboth Beach. The press pool was told that Biden had COVID. Nothing more was said on Air Force One. Now, after Biden's return to Delaware, the White House told the public that Biden had contracted a COVID infection and would be in isolation. He was said to have upper respiratory symptoms, a runny nose, a cough, and was fatigued. That was the last straw for the core group of congressional leaders, which we saw in the Seymour Hersh article, like Pelosi, Schumer, etc. And there was, quote, there was pressure on donors to come across on their pending commitments, the official told Seymour Hersh, quote, it was understood that Biden had a physical problem in Las Vegas and the family was saying no to continued pressure from donors and senior Democrats in Congress to withdraw from the presidential campaign. Initially, the president could not be reached. Now, by Saturday, July 20th, former President Barack Obama was deeply involved, and there was talk that he would place a call to Biden. It was not clear whether Biden had been examined or just what had happened to him in Las Vegas. Now, the big three, which was those politicians, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, continued to be directly involved. And then on Sunday morning, the official told Seymour Hersh, with the approval of Pelosi and Schumer, quote, Obama called Biden after breakfast and said, quote, here's the deal. We have Kamala's approval to invoke the 25th Amendment. The amendment provides that when the president is determined by the vice president and others to be unfit to carry out the powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall assume those duties. So we have some more to dive into, but we kind of have confirmation. I don't want to say it's factual because it is an undisclosed source to an investigative journalist, but it seems like Obama's behind the scenes kind of pulling the strings on to what's going on in the Democratic Party. What are you thinking? I see you steaming over here.
I'm thinking a lot right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the deal. All right, we're about to get deep right now. Okay,
Let's get
of all,
deep.
I told so many people so many times. I guarantee it. Obama's behind the scenes, pulling the strings, making stuff happen. Media will make jokes about it, and they have. We talked about it last week about the interview that Obama had, where he's like, "Whoa, what do you think I'm doing? Just sitting in a basement, just making, watching everything go down and just making calls and sending texts out." Yeah, that's exactly what I think you were doing, and I'm not the only one that thought that. What blows my mind though is how did he still manage to, because whether or not you left Washington D.C. or not doesn't matter, because there's a lot of politicians that still live in Washington D.C. or even live there, even if they don't have any reason to anymore. They just do. So first of all, how do you still have those connections and those abilities? Secondly, how do you not, like, how does this go unwarranted? Because let me also start off by saying that whether or not Kamala was endorsed by the Obamas, by the Clintons, by whoever else she was endorsed by, the simple fact remains that because she was just elected the Democratic nominee, even though she wasn't, the very thing that the Democrats say that they're fighting for, literally they went against. Because you have to vote for your Democratic nominee. The people have to vote for them and they have to show their support to that person, not just throw them in there. You're literally taking democracy away from your own side of people that are voting for you. You are taking that away from them. And again, I don't care what side, it shouldn't even be about sides. It really should just be about, like, what can we do as a people to make our country better, because it seems like they can't do anything to make our country better, so we have to figure it out on our own. I don't They say they make laws and they do what's best for the people. They don't. Like, we need to honestly do what's best for ourselves. But I don't understand how the Obamas can still do the stuff they do, how no one is coming out and saying anything about it, or if they do, they'll probably get disappeared. Let's be honest. But then they want to attack Trump and say he's this, but yet they're doing the exact same stuff that they are saying should not be done, and that they're trying to come at him for, if that makes sense. And so it just, to me, I don't like where this is going, because also too, the whole 25th Amendment thing. I told everyone when Obama got elected, I was telling people, I was like, you watch, like, I was reading stuff, watching videos, things like that. They're going to find some way to invoke the 25th Amendment, and they're going to declare him mentally incapacitated. And this is like 2 years into his presidency that we were expecting this to go down. But here's the funny thing, though. Throughout almost the entire term of Joe Biden's presidency, not hardly ever did we see Kamala Harris on TV or anywhere, for that fact. She was just gone. So to me, it's like, were they planning this behind the scenes the entire time and waiting for this election to come about? Because they knew Trump was going to come up for re-election again. They knew he was going to try and push for re-election again. And they were like, okay, we got to do something here. And so their last-ditched effort was to put someone in their place that wasn't even actually elected by the people.
Man, a lot to unpack there. I think a few things, while they're still top of mind for me, just kind of respond on what you're talking about there. So I think the Obama family, Barack Obama in particular, I think his name still carries a lot of weight, because political parties are like a business at the end of the day. They are factions of business that elect a CEO to run the holding company that is the United States of America. I guess that's one way to look at it. And I think a lot of ex-CEOs or ex-founders still have a lot of influence on those on the board of companies that they no longer directly work for and serve. I think very similarly with the office of the president, I think Barack Obama was such a pivotal figure in the Democratic Party, especially in his lead up. I'm not going to say, I don't know if you remember, we might have been too young, but it almost felt like politically he kind of came out of nowhere as like the electorate for the DNC. Now, he checked a lot of boxes and he spoke really well. I'll give him that. Like, the dude can speak. He can motivate people, especially if you go back and look at those early speeches in like 2007, 2008. But I think he has a lot of connections and a lot of influence still. Not to even dive into the money that floats around behind the scenes that we'll just never know. I think there's so much money funneled in and out of Washington that no one will ever have the full story on it, because so much of it is like dark pool money that it's just never reported on. But I think Obama still has a lot of pool with those that are still in power. Now, how long does that last? I think it depends on the turnover rate in Congress and the Senate, just because it's still the status quo. If you think about it, how many people were in the House of Representatives while Obama was president that are still there, 2 presidential terms later? They're still there. There's just, was it 8 years older now, basically.
Right.
And his first term was in 2008. And he was a 2-term president. So I think he still knows a lot of people that have high ranking seats, especially in the DNC, to be able to pull those strings.
Right.
There was something else I was going to mention. Oh, Kamala Harris being kind of not seen and now being seen all over the place all of a sudden. Have you seen where people are observing that history is being rewritten about Kamala's term as vice president? In particular, the narrative behind being in charge of the southern border. Have you been seeing this talked about at all?
Was that like when she was like, "We've been to the border, like we've been to the border and we've seen it," and then the guy asked her, like, he's like, "Oh, you've been to the border," and she was like, "Well," or he's like, "So you haven't been to the border?" And he was like, "Well, I haven't been to Europe either." Are you talking about that video?
Not that video in particular, but kind of in line with that. So if you remember, Biden, or at least the office of the president, put Kamala Harris, the vice president, in charge of the southern border throughout that term. So
I do remember that. Yeah.
yeah, they even called her the border czar. Like that was the title they gave her. Now we're seeing the script flip on that. That now the narrative is showing that apparently she was never in charge of the southern border and was never given the title border czar because it's been such a terrible flop. She hasn't done anything with it. There's so many examples. I can play you CNN clips. I don't know if we'll get hit with copyrights with it, but like here's like a written example. So here's an article from Axios, which if anyone's familiar with Axios, they have pretty obvious left leaning, but they have a lot of news articles posted, so they're used as reference a lot. Their article has a little section here that talks about Vice President Harris said Wednesday she plans to visit Mexico and Guatemala, quote, as soon as possible, in a diplomatic effort to address surging migration at the U.S.-Mexico border, Reuters reports. Now, why does this matter? The article goes on to say the number of unaccompanied minors crossing the border has reached crisis levels. Harris, appointed by Biden as border czar, said she would be looking at the quote-unquote root causes that drive migration. Now, this was early on in the Biden administration when she was first appointed, but this is like a left-leaning news company talking about how Biden had appointed Vice President Kamala Harris as the border czar to go take care of their southern border. We know it's been a hot mess down there. We know little to nothing's been done about it. So now, as an example, Axios, the exact same news outlet, is saying the Trump campaign and Republicans have tagged Harris repeatedly with the quote-unquote border czar title, which she never actually had. So what's the truth? Was she the border czar or was she not? Now, for those of you questioning it, just Google it. There's so many examples of videos. I just don't want to play it because of copyrights on YouTube, but you can see where CNN says it, and then they say it never existed. You can see it on Fox where they say it was, and now Fox is like, oh, well, maybe not. You can see it on both sides where it's like they're calling her the border czar, and now she's apparently not the border czar. So what's correct? And what's kind of eerie about this is you're almost watching the quote-unquote mainstream media attempt to change history in real time. But as we all know, once something's out there on the internet, it's forever. So we have screenshots, we have video to reference and say, hey, no, you called her the border czar. That was the title that was given to her at the time.
Right. Well, see, it also goes without saying, and again, this isn't a personal attack on her, but when she came out like on 2 separate occasions after COVID, and she was like, over 220 million people died to COVID. So you're saying we were black plagued and we lost 2/3 of our population to COVID? That's not true at all. But yeah, I don't know. I just, right now as it still stands, like I've been seeing like, like, because we talked about this too, like Twitter pages and stuff like that, and they're saying like Harris is leading this and this. I don't think she is. I'm pretty sure Trump is still leading by like a lot in a lot of different areas. And at the end of the day, we won't know a lot about anything until the DNC happens. Once the DNC happens next month, we'll have a clearer picture about hopefully a clearer picture about what's going to happen. But I guess kind of while we're on the topic of this, a little bit of a story came out regarding former President Trump, possibly soon to be reelected President Trump, where he made a comment this past week that said, let me pull it up here.
Yeah.
let's see. That Trump made a comment saying that if Trump is reelected, they will never have to vote again, or they don't have to vote again. Take this with a grain of salt as to kind of what you think it means. But he said you won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. And those are his words saying that at a rally. And he said, I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote. Now, I'm not saying. I'll be honest with you. I feel like this is probably the both sides ideology. Both sides are trying to push this right now because both sides realize that if they don't win, something's going to happen and it's going to affect every side. Don't know what that's specifically going to be. Don't know how they're going to do it, but and so it's like as a vow to end democracy. And so it's like I'm not necessarily saying obviously end democracy, but it's like we need. If you're going to vote, you need to have it needs to be the exact way it needs to be. You need to go to a physical location and have a government issued ID with you to be able to vote. They do this whole mail-in voting system stuff to where you can just vote from home and be perfectly fine. And no, like you need to actually vote for real. Realistically, I'm going to go out on a limb and say like this election is probably one of the most important elections that we're probably going to see in our lifetime. Not to say that the 2016 and the 2020 elections weren't, but those were also very different times than what we're facing now. But it just, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. But just hearing him say that, though, a buddy of mine brought that up to me, and it's just like, what does this exactly mean? Like, what are we going to be dealing with if either side wins? Because we know either side's going to do everything they can to try to put the other one out.
I saw a lot of people tweeting or posting about this direct quote, seeing the videos of him mid-speech as well. And my first thought was, could this have been misconstrued to where he really meant, because like you can only serve 2 terms as president of the United States.
Right.
So is this him potentially intending to mean like, come on guys, like you got to get out and vote this time, but it's the last time I'll be asking you this, because like he can't run again, right? So it's like the last vote for, I don't want to say, I guess like MAGA Republicans per se. Like I'm sure that the baton's gonna be handed off because you got JD Vance as VP. He'll probably assume to be the nominee 4 years from now. Right. I assume things could change between now and then, but I almost wonder, like, did he really just intend it to be hey guys, this is the last straw, this is the Hail Mary, like I need you to come out and vote for me, and then that's it. You don't have to worry about it ever again because it'll be someone else's.
And reading that and looking at that, it could be interpreted that way. Obviously, the other way that most extreme, either right or left people are going to say is, oh, they're going to invoke martial law, or there's going to be a war that's going to start and they're going to declare emergency powers and they're not going to be able to be taken out of office until the war is done. Things like that. Like there's a lot of people out there that take it to those extremes. At the end of the day, again, we don't know what's going to happen, but if you go out there and vote what you think is best for our country, 100% go out there and vote for what you think is best for our country. We're not here to sway you either way. We're just here to talk about stuff that's happened, gone on, things that we see, but whatever you feel is best, go out there and vote. And then once November happens, we'll know. But I'm not going to sit here and say that either side is not going to try to pull some sleazy tricks, because that's what these past 3 elections have been about. 2 or 3 elections have been about, is like some kind of something happening where it's prevented one party from doing one thing or another party from doing another. So again, we'll see what happens.
Have you heard or read any of the news commentary over the last week? Because Netanyahu, who's the president, prime minister of Israel, he came to the U.S. He spoke in front of Congress. He met with Trump. And the rhetoric is extremely strong about Israel is correct and everyone else in the Middle East is wrong. Such a hotly debated topic, but it really seems like the rhetoric is being spun up to finally say, hey guys, like we got to go to war with Iran, and we have to basically fully back Israel on this. And the idea would be using the state of Israel as a land aircraft carrier for the US military to run operations out of, to go to war, albeit maybe a proxy war with Iran. I've also heard the idea spun up. I read rumors about this, so some of this may not be true, but I read rumors that part of the reason Netanyahu was in Washington was to spin up the idea of something called the Abraham Alliance. And the name of the Abraham Alliance is a play on the Abraham Accords, which is like a peace treaty. But the idea with the Abraham Alliance would be creating NATO in the Middle East, so like another version of NATO, but for Israel across the Middle East, to say like, hey, if you attack or you mess with one of us, you have to deal with all of us. And using that as the next forever war in a sense, because if you go back, there's I don't know if it's technically conspiracy, if it's proven true, but there was a list of all the countries that I guess, U.S. intelligence had documented saying post 9/11, these are all the countries we're going to invade. And it basically had all the countries you've seen us go to war with, Iraq, Syria, etc. Iran was on that list, but we have yet to really make an indent in Iran. For obvious reasons, it would be bloody, it would be nasty. It's a geopolitical hot mess to get into, first of all, with Iran. But it really seems like we're finally circling the wagons to say it's time to go in Iran. However, a lot of this is going to be dictated by what happens in November, because if the Trump administration takes office, I don't think we have any wars. I think we back out of most of it. We kind of bat down the hatches, secure ourselves, and we move forward.
Which is what needs to happen, in my opinion.
I know.
Just saying.
Dude, that's my ultimate thing. I don't understand. We don't need wars. Well, I'm not going to say we don't need wars anymore, but in an ideal world, we have the resources to where we can become a hermit kingdom again and basically just lock it down. We don't have to lock the borders per se in the sense of nobody's in or out, but saying, let's protect the home base. Let's make sure nobody else, messes with us and
bring stuff back to our country, just how it should be. Like, we just don't need to be getting involved in other things that are not us, whether or not they're allies or not, but
Yeah. But it really seems that if Trump's not the president that's elected, it really seems like at this point, we were probably going to have a military conflict in Iran probably within the next calendar year. But take my words with a grain of salt. One thing I thought that was very interesting was whenever Netanyahu was flying into the U.S., he was originally supposed to meet with Biden. And then because of the whole Biden, COVID, whatever, dropping out, canceled that meeting. Biden's team canceled that with Netanyahu. And so he's like, okay, well, can I meet with Kamala Harris? Kamala Harris's team says, nope, not happening. So then he goes to meet with Trump. So it's very interesting that, the leader of Israel currently wanted to meet with the president, wanted to meet with the vice president. They both said no for whatever reason. You can assume what that reason is. He ends up meeting with Trump. So in my brain, I'm like, if you wanted to meet with Trump, he knows there's probably a very strong chance that Trump will be the next president of the United States. But what I thought was hilarious, and I'll share my screen real quick and share this video, the initial time that he met Trump at Mar-a-Lago, look at this handshake that goes down with Trump. Did you notice how he pulled him in? Like almost like an alpha move of like, hey, you're in my game now, to where it's like, watch this. He reaches out, grabs his hand, and then like yanks him in. It's like a very subtle, like, hey, we're playing by my rules on this. So it makes me think that, similar to the Ukraine situation, Trump doesn't want any part of it. He doesn't want to play those games anymore. He's like, hey, like we got to get out of these situations.
Figure something out.
Yeah, like we'll help in certain aspects, but
we're not going to just send you billions of dollars.
Exactly. One other thing to kind of just close the chapter on the Kamala Harris story, there was some information, kind of a, I don't want to say breaking news, but a conspiracy that came out over the weekend with the money that's coming into the Harris campaign.
Dude, this right here. Oh my gosh. Go ahead though. Just go ahead.
Yeah, so headline says funny money. Act Blue accused of massive money laundering operation as Trump files FEC complaint over $91 million transferred to Kamala Harris. So, this is from Zero Hedge, of course. Democrat donation platform Act Blue has been accused of engaging in a massive money laundering operation by which contributions from large donors are being funneled through hundreds of thousands of small donations made in the name of people who have no clue they've donated. There's a post from X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, says, I'm told Harris campaign is already using Act Blue money laundering scheme. $20 million from someone named Johann George Weiss, known as Hans-Georg Weiss, born 19 of September 1935, a Swiss billionaire, and was broken down into over 1,600,000 donations across 400,000 donors. So basically the concept here is you get a large donation from somebody in the millions of tens of millions of dollars, but then you break that up into tiny dollar values across a bunch of different people, or maybe the same person, but X amount of times over days and months. So the accusation comes as the platform says it had its best day of 2024 and possibly of all time in the wake of President Biden abandoning his re-election campaign on Sunday. Act Blue has been previously fined for facilitating nearly $44,000 in illegal contributions. Meanwhile, journalist James O'Keefe, who, if anyone remembers him, he used to have Project Veritas. Now it's O'Keefe Media Group. But James O'Keefe approached these alleged donors with hundreds of thousands of contributions listed in their name who knew nothing about them. So a journalist got a hold of the list of names of, this would be like if Riley had donated 400,000 times to the Trump campaign, but in like $10 increments, but it adds up to millions of dollars. And a journalist would go knock on Riley's door and be like, excuse me, sir, have you made these donations? And then Riley would be like, what? No, I haven't made any political donations. What's happening here? But someone made those donations. So that's the question of what's happening here.
Right.
Now, the funny part about all this is Trump and his team are aware of this because the Trump campaign filed a complaint with the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, on Tuesday of this past week, accusing President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris of violating campaign finance laws with the transfer of $91 million in fundraising cash to her new campaign. Yes. According to the complaint, Harris is, quote, seeking to perpetuate a $91.5 million heist of Joe Biden's leftover campaign cash. So what I think is funny about this is, do you remember how they tried to get Trump on?
That's what I'm saying. This is the whole ordeal, man. They're trying to get Trump like on 40 something odd felonies, 41 felonies, I think is what it was. Now keep in mind, half of these felonies, I guarantee it, a lot of the Democratic Party has committed, or even just any politician has committed in any shape, form, or fashion. Like, we're just not going to sit here and act like they haven't. I blows my mind how people can do so. But they try to get him on these 41 felonies. He goes to a rally, almost gets assassinated. A judge is like, you know what? We're throwing this out. He's not going to get indicted. We're done with this. Just leave it alone, kind of thing. And then the Democratic Party tries to do the exact same thing that they were trying to get him for in the first place, on top of everything else. And what a lot of people think and we'll wrap up on this part and go on to a couple other topics here in a second. But what a lot of people think is funny, though, is they're thinking like, oh, Kamala Harris was a former district attorney. Trump is a felon right now. We're going to play this out and see how this. No, Trump never got indicted. He never got convicted of those crimes, but yet he filed a complaint on the exact same thing that you guys tried to get him thrown in prison for. Funny how things work out.
Yeah. I think nature, life, whatever you want to call it, has a way. I guess karma, some people call it karma. But I'm very curious to see where this lawsuit goes, if it ends up getting dropped at any point. We'll definitely give you all updates if Riley and I come across any updates. Not to assume the pivot we're about to make, but just because you brought up the attempted assassination of the former President Donald Trump, are you aware of some of the new revelations that have come out about this individual, Crooks, and just the conspiratorial aspect behind this?
Yep.
So, man, where do we begin with this? I'm going to share 2 posts real quick. Let me share my screen. One thing that's come to light here, there has been cell phone data that, according to the Heritage Foundation, which we talked about the Heritage Foundation with Project 2025, but they've acquired the cell phone data that basically shows that there was a frequent visitor to Crooks, who was the attempted assassin of former President Donald Trump, that is in connection with an FBI building in DC. So it's very interesting. So mobile ad data analyst by the Heritage Foundation's Oversight Project revealed that someone who regularly visited Thomas Crooks's Pennsylvania home also visited a building in Washington, D.C. near an FBI office. The analysis identified 9 devices linked to Crooks's home and work. These findings suggest Crooks did not act alone in the assassination attempt on Trump. Now, despite these inquiries, Secret Service Director Kimberly Sheetal referred questions about Crooks' potential accomplices to the FBI. And of course, when you ask the FBI, they're going to direct it back to Secret Service. So really, it's a giant, rigmarole, and nobody's really going to give you a clear answer on what the heck is happening here.
Facts.
Now, the other thing that gets a little more wild about this, that I actually learned about this morning, that I honestly never would have guessed this. So get this. Apparently, the Secret Service Director, Kim Cheadle, who, by the way, did step down. She resigned earlier this week, so she no longer in charge of the Secret Service, only about a year on the job, basically. But apparently, she had close ties to the Cheneys. Yes, Dick Cheney, vice president under George W. Bush, also first dude in the bunker on 9/11 while George Bush was not in the bunker. A lot of questions unanswered there. But apparently, Kim Cheadle, former Secret Service director, has close ties with the Cheneys, the Bidens, and is responsible for the January 6th deleted text scandal. So she was also there when they evacuated Vice President Dick Cheney on 9/11. Quote, she would know. The 28-year veteran was on the team that evacuated Vice President Dick Cheney on 9/11, and she served on then Vice President Biden's protective detail. He named her director in mid-2022. So there's actually a clip here. I think I'm sharing audio. Let me know if I'm not, Riley, but I'm going to click play on this.
She would know. The 28-year veteran was on the team that evacuated Vice President Dick Cheney on 9/11, and she served on then Vice President Biden's protective detail. He named her director in mid-2022. Amid a swirl of controversy over the agency deleting nearly all of its text messages from January 6th. The agency says that was due to a data migration.
System migrations happen, but I think for a lot of Americans, it just doesn't pass the smell test, given the timing and the volume of messages deleted.
Well, it's unfortunate that that would be the assumption that people would make. Our integrity is everything, and there was nothing nefarious attached to that.
Their integrity has, she would know.
Nothing nefarious.
I just hate how they, doesn't matter what kind of politician you are, I hate how they can just, with a straight face, just lie like that. And it very well might be true. But at the same time, it's like there's too much that was happening with all of that kind of lines up to what happened and what's happening in the most recent weeks. Like there's just too much that's just happening in a specific order. And forgive the conspiracy theorists in me. That's just how my brain is operating with everything that's happening right now. I've always got my eyes open about what's going on.
Exactly. This is not a conspiracy theory, so don't be concerned, because we know, breaking news, the CIA has officially denied the conspiracy theory that it used MK Ultra on the Trump shooting. Thomas Matthew Crooks was not part of some Manchurian candidate-like plot, according to the spy agency, the CIA. So everyone rest assured, Crooks acted alone. I'm sure he did. No influence, no programs, just business as usual, people. Also, think about this one, Riley, and everyone listening at home. I don't care what time and day it is right now. Think about this for a second. Why have we not heard more about the shooter? We don't know anything about him, really. Like, yeah, we've heard from a couple former classmates. We know he was in a BlackRock TV commercial for like half a second. But who was this guy? Who was his parents? Did he have siblings? What did his house look like? Was there a manifesto?
That also, but the last, this is the last thing I have to say about all this, but you know how, like, as soon as this shooting happened, they were like, oh, we got to ban AR-15s. We're done with them. They were like, he shouldn't have had it. Okay, well, then why aren't you going after the parents and indicting the parents then? Putting them on trial. Like, the parent, like, whether or not he was 20 years old or not, like, the parents should have had those guns locked up if he wasn't supposed to touch them while they weren't there. You know, like, be that as it may. But that's my piece on it. Like, there's a lot of questions that we're probably never going to get answers to, unfortunately. That's just the way the world works.
Yeah.
So.
That's unfortunately how you sum it up, basically. We're not going to get the answers. We're going to still be complaining about this probably a year from now, except more news will happen. We'll, over time, just forget this even happened, which is just so wild if you think about it. We went from an attempted assassination on Trump to charges being dropped on Trump because they knew they couldn't work out. Biden steps down. Kamala gets endorsed. The Secret Service director steps down. It's almost like they were just like, hey, let's keep the party rolling, but let's forget that we messed up and just get a new narrative going. And they spun up a good narrative, because right now everyone's talking about Kamala Harris, both good and bad. But like, it was just 2 weeks ago, if that, we had an attempted assassination on a former president. I don't care who it is, but that's crazy to think that we went from an attempted assassination that was literally, like, I don't know, 5 inches away from being extremely lethal, to yay, Kamala Harris, future president, yippee.
Well, on a lighter note, I guess, to kind of talk on for a few minutes to kind of get away from the political talk, we'll talk about one of our other favorite topics, and that's the weather and the Earth.
Good old
instances, Earth. Good old Earth. 2 instances happened. One was a little bit more pressing than the other one, but for those of you who know and who have ever been to Yellowstone National Park, know that it is the largest active, I think it's the largest active volcano on the planet, if I'm not mistaken.
I know for sure on the continent. I want to say the whole planet, but for sure the continent.
But it had an explosion, and let me just kind of pull this up here. I can pull up a video regarding it.
It was just a minor pimple, if you think about it.
Yeah, just a minor pimple.
FoxNews.com just got a little better.
I don't care about ads.
Oh, but FoxNews.com just got a little better.
Dude, it did, man. I don't care about ads.
Do you have Fox Plus Premium?
I don't, dude.
Oh, you get to skip half the ads if you have that. It's only $50 a month. Here we go. 911.
I mean, listen to that. Just an absolutely terrifying encounter that this family had while at the Yellowstone National Park. Thankfully, no injuries were reported after an explosion that sent rocks and debris flying everywhere and damaging a pedestrian bridge.
Yeah, for those of you listening, no video, this looks like someone dropped a bomb, basically, and you have
hundreds of feet into the air. And unfortunately, that explosion occurred in the Biscuit Basin area, an area known to contain several geysers.
And here to explain the reason behind all of this shocking event to unfold is Michael Poland, geophysicist with the USGS.
We're not going to watch the whole thing.
Michael, thank you.
But just to kind of like touch up on that, needless to say, they shut the whole entire park down for the remainder of the year, or for the summer at least. It was an unexpected explosion from one of the geysers, but it was different than most of them, though. I mean, obviously, it's got built-up pressure. And for those of you who may not know, but if the volcano itself was to actually erupt, it would wipe out, I'm pretty sure, majority of our country, and it would also, I don't think it would do a lot of damage to, we've talked about this before in a previous episode, but it might affect other volcanoes in other areas and the underlying connections for those that could trigger other catastrophic events elsewhere.
Riley, if you want, I can share my screen and show you a little map of what that would look like.
I think we looked at it before, but go ahead.
I think we have too when we had our top 10 doomsday theories.
Yeah.
Supervolcano blast would blanket the U.S. in ash, so we can see, I was about to say Minnesota, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho here, but everyone, even all the way to South Florida and Miami, like nobody's safe on this continent. Maybe southern Mexico when you get into Central America,
or the little southern part of Texas that's right there. That's not even covered.
But think about it at that point. Where are you getting your food? Where's the water coming from?
Nowhere.
Yeah.
Everything's contaminated at that point. Like you have nothing, and everything's going to be, because of the heat, everything's going to be dried up. Like it's literally a catastrophe that if it happens. But just to kind of put that in people's ears, like it doesn't necessarily mean anything is going to happen, but just be aware that, the earth is definitely unpredictable, and unpredictable in a way that, things like this happen. Just like, for those of us and for those of our listeners who live in Texas, we just had an earthquake, a 5.1 scale earthquake that happened near Abilene, Sweetwater, and all that. Now, take it with a grain of salt. People were saying that this was caused by all of the drilling and the fracking and stuff out in West Texas, which is very, very possible. But the thing is, though, is apparently people up here in North Texas were able to feel the shocking effects from that, which begs the question, because we've actually gotten a couple of earthquakes, like a couple small earthquakes, like most recently this year, in areas that we've never had earthquakes before, to my knowledge. So it begs the question, are we actually becoming like closer to a fault line ourselves? Like, or is it just because of all the mining and drilling that's going on in West Texas? Like, that's my question.
That's a good question. I've always wondered about that because I'm not a scientist. I'm a dummy at the end of the day, but the concept of hydraulic fracturing causing these earthquakes makes sense to me with my small, feeble mind. So I wonder if the trend continues, like there's going to be a moment where what if we have a decent sized earthquake in the city of Dallas or Fort Worth proper, even Austin, or let's just say Lubbock, or it's been a hot second since I've been to Odessa. I imagine they have a highway flyover somewhere. Maybe they don't. But when you're on a highway flyover, like in Dallas, you have the high five, where it's like 5 layers of highway that are overpassing each other, and an earthquake hits. My brain instantly goes to, and I forget the formal name of it, but that big earthquake that hit Oakland and San Francisco, I think it was in the 80s, where they had highways falling over, and it got pretty grim. So imagine if you're just like on the high five or just any, overpass, and like the ground starts rumbling, and like that's it. You're like 10 stories in the air, and there's nothing you can do about it.
That's like I'm not scared of, like, obviously, getting on some of those like higher up bridges. Like that doesn't worry me. Obviously the ultimate goal is to get on them and get off them as fast as possible, but dude, like you just put a new fear in my body though. I never considered that, never thought about it. Cause like now what would actually really scare me though is not that. So if you haven't been up in the Dallas area in a while, so you have 635. Okay. So you have 635 that goes through the north side of Dallas. Well, under 635, you have the 635 Tech Expressway, which is the toll road that goes under that is actually in between both highways, but it's underground.
That's the with Clyde Warren Park on top of it.
I think so, yeah. And so it's like, imagine an earthquake happens, and you have all those overpasses that also go perpendicular to that. You get stuck down there. You get crushed.
Yeah. And they're getting ready to actually do that in Austin too. They're going to bury I-35 the same way that's buried up in Dallas too. So we're going to start to see more and more of those major highways in Texas. So imagine if you're stuck as a commuter in traffic, you're in bumper to bumper, and then boom, the earthquake hits. It doesn't even have to be that strong of an earthquake, because I could be totally wrong with this, but I don't think a lot of our infrastructure is fully earthquake proof. The same way that it is along the San Andreas Fault on the West Coast, and the way Tokyo and Japan and like Korea, they prep for that a lot more. But it makes sense. In Texas, we don't typically get earthquakes.
We don't prep for anything that isn't like, well, let's be honest, Texas doesn't prep for any kind of weather, because if it gets too hot, they do rolling blackouts. If it gets too cold, they do rolling blackouts, because our power infrastructure sucks and is awful. And as far, well, like I said, with this earthquake though, like, I mean, I can even just kind of pull up just like a little small map of where it showed that it was at. Like this is literally the location right here.
Man, it really was a 5.1 magnitude earthquake, 16 miles from Snyder, Texas, July 26th at 9:28 a.m.
Yeah,
prime time, baby.
There were a couple. So Carlsbad, New Mexico, July 23rd at 1:50 a.m. Another one near Carlsbad, 52 miles from there, July 23rd. So these were actually happening like, and if you've ever, obviously there's I-20 right there that goes across all the way into Midland. So it's like these were all happening, I assume, across I-20. So, and there is a lot of, mining and, oil drilling and fracking and stuff out there. But, a lot of these were, but this was just the most recent one that was July 26th. Actually, no, they had July 27th. So another Snyder, Texas one. So you had a couple that were near Snyder, Texas.
You know what that means, right? Next week, we have to talk about hollow earth theory because there's only one plausible explanation for what's causing these earthquakes. Those below us are sending us a message. Now, what is that message? I have no idea, but they're down there.
Tune in next week to find out, I guess.
Yeah, they're like our neighbors in an apartment that are hitting the broomstick on the ceiling because we're being too loud above them.
Yeah.
Like, hey, quiet that racket.
But no, we'll see what happens with all that. Like I said, Texas isn't prone to earthquakes, but we have gotten a couple. Apparently more than what I thought we were getting this year. So
it's a lot. It's a lot more than I think people realize, because even that one being a 5.1 magnitude, like, yeah, it was in the news, but like for those who don't pay attention to the news, like they're not going to know that happened unless they're probably living out in the panhandle somewhere and it was much more prevalent in, social media, etc., things like that.
Right.
Man, we didn't even get to half the topics we had on our list, but I think we had a good litany of things that happened this past week.
Mm-hmm.
Man, what was your biggest highlight from this last week? Was it even something that we didn't even talk about, or?
No, like I said, it was just kind of one of those weeks, man. We've just been getting ready for a lot of new changes and a lot of stuff with real estate and stuff. So, so for those of you who are watching, just a little bit of information for y'all. Starting on August 17th, technically they want us to start doing it prior, but effectively August 17th, for those of you who are wanting to or looking to buy a house, it is going to be by law required that you have a signed document with the realtor that is going to show you a home. There are more forms to choose from in that sense. Like there's two different ones to choose from, but how the realtor fills it out and how y'all come upon those agreed terms is how you come upon those agreed terms. But it will be required by law that you have to have a signed agreement with that realtor every time you want to tour a house, or depending on how long you want the agreement to go for. Again, your realtor should go over all that with you. If they don't, that means they are breaking the law come August 17th, and you don't want to work with someone who does that. So,
no, definitely don't want to be working with someone who has no idea that's even happening, first of all. I'm curious to see what that does to the industry, to be honest with you. I feel like it's going to forever change it. I don't know if it's going to be negative or positive. Like, what's your gut tell you? Do you think it's a good thing?
Yes. Coming from someone who works on a team and who works Zillow leads, I definitely think it is going to be a good thing. Because not saying that what I do when I work with certain leads is a waste of time, because it is not. But let's just say I work with someone for 7 or 8 months. They still haven't found anything yet, and we didn't have a signed agreement. They could just find a house and go put an offer in with the original realtor that they were going to work with. They could work with multiple different realtors until they found the house they want. With this, it actually protects both parties, and it even protected both parties prior to that, but people just didn't explain it the right way. We have already seen an influx of realtors still dropping off and leaving the industry, but those are the ones who, respectfully, I feel like they just didn't want to put in all that extra work and have to go through all that stuff. But I'm here for it. I'm here to serve my community, here to serve as many people as I can. And, if that means having to put in a few extra documents just to make sure that everything is disclosed, to make sure everything is documented, I'll do what I got to do, I think it'll be a good thing for the industry, though. I do. A lot of agents are like still upset about it because we're already seeing sellers not paying buyers agents commissions, and it's fine. Just find ways to negotiate it with your clients. Like there's ways to do it. It's just you got to talk with your brokers, talk with your team, and if they're not doing anything to help you, then maybe it's time that you find a new brokerage. So
No, that makes sense. Speaking of documentation, though, one final thing I'll leave all of you out there listening and watching is if you head over to unscriptedcompany.com, scroll down, we have a newsletter. We also have merch that you can check out. The newsletter is a cool way for us to make sure that you know every time we upload a new episode, because those pesky algorithms, I know we talked about this in our 25th episode special live stream, but it's interesting seeing how our show performs on Spotify and Rumble versus YouTube. So our newsletter is a fun way for us to make sure that you know as soon as we upload a new episode, plus extra fun tidbits of theoretically useful information. Could be useless to you. I don't know.
I think it's worth a good time.
Yeah, here for a good time. But also you can tell we have hoodies, we have shirts, there's merch. You can help support the show that way. But the easiest way, the best free way, is sign up for the newsletter, like, comment, subscribe, follow, sell your soul to the algorithms, and we will see you on the next one. But as I always do, Riley, we'll put you on the spot. Give the people some age-old wisdom to send them off on their ways.
Okay. As I stated earlier, please do your due diligence as an American citizen and go vote the right way. Don't be lazy about it, and don't do it from home, or don't do the online or mail-in ballots. Like go vote, do your due diligence, do your service, go vote. Be careful out there in West Texas if you are out there in that area or in the New Mexico area, or just even in any affected areas that have recently felt the aftershocks. Just be careful. Earthquakes are dangerous, and so we want to make sure that you stay safe. Also too, be careful of Yellowstone. Obviously it's close for the rest of the summer, so you won't have to worry about anything, but again, be safe and do your research, people. Like the earth is very unpredictable. We have no idea what it can do. And, with just the way the earth has been this year and the weather has been and everything, can't be too safe. So